Thank you very much, Kavi. You've gone straight into my first slide. This is the curve, the inverted U-shaped curve, which all road safety and the people in the world have used. And based on this modeling, as Kavi said, India cannot reduce its deaths until 2042, which is too late because I'll be dead by then. So there's no point in my doing any safety work. Because if we're going to reduce after I'm dead, I don't really care. So there must be something wrong with the theory that if I can't reduce deaths in my lifetime, then why should I work for road safety? So there has to be something wrong. And luckily, this estimates recently, I don't care for the exact numbers, but what these estimates show, these are the, whether you take WHO modeling or GBD, what it shows is that the death rates on the left-hand side of the curve, which are the poor countries, have gone up in the estimates, which I tend to believe. That is, underreporting in poorer countries is higher. So therefore, the data on the left-hand side of the curve will go up. I really don't care whether the estimates are 50% correct or 90% correct, but the left side will go up. If the left side goes up, then what you see then is that everyone can decrease. You don't have a U-shaped curve anymore. No matter where you are, you can go down. And the second most important understanding is, first understanding is that all models have been wrong up to now. And all of us who call ourselves experts have been stupid. Because we took bad data to come up with a bad result. Everyone on one hand said that poor countries don't have good data, but then they use the bad data to what they think is a good result. And so you can't take bad data and come up with a mathematical theory. Now, if we take this, even if it's approximately correct, then what you also understand is that it is possible, no matter where you are, at what income, if you do certain things in whatever way possible, deaths will reduce. But even the more important thing is that all income levels, the worst country is 5 times worse than the best country, whether you're poor or rich. And there are no people in this room who can explain that, including me, because no work has been done to decide, find out why a country which has $50,000 income has a death rate of 10, and another country which has a per capita income of same $50,000 has a death rate of 3. We have very little understanding of these differences. As you can see, whether it is in the previous curve, even the bad data, there are differences, and the slightly better data, there are differences at each income level. So if you want to understand anything, I think money should be spent by people who are going around the world spending millions of dollars, which don't work, to at least find out at $5,000 income, $10,000 income, $15,000 income, $30,000 income, take the worst 5 countries and the best 5 countries and find out what's the difference. This kind of research is not going to take more than $3, $4, $5, $6 million. And it might explain more about what Mark was talking about. What are the underlying differences in city structure, road structure? If I have to get into my car to buy an egg and go 5 kilometers, obviously I'm going to die sooner than someone who goes around the street to buy an egg. So how we design our cities and our society, the more supermarkets you build, the more people you kill, instead of having local places to shop. Because you have more air conditioning, more cement, more miles to drive, so supermarkets kill people. But we're not willing to discuss that. The other thought experiment I did, that these are the current death rates in India, Japan, and Sweden. So you can see India is really bad, 4 times worse than Sweden or Japan. So what I did is, I'm taking the current death rate per motorcyclist, per car occupant, and pedestrian in each one of these countries. Then I change the modal share of Sweden and Japan to India's modal share. So for the same number of vehicles, I change the share and I make in Sweden and Japan have 3 times more motorcycles than cars, but use their death rates, and this is what happens. So what that means is that if Sweden and Japan had same proportion of motors, keeping constant the total number, if the proportions were different, that they had 4 times more motorcycles, they had the same ratio of motorcycles and cars as India, then their current death rates with all the systems approach, all the zero whatever, their death rates would be 3 times higher. Now, so with all the systems approach, that means India can only expect to come from here to here. Even my numbers are wrong. So what that means is that much of the Western success has come from getting rid of pedestrians and motorcyclists. It's not a nice thing. All your children are in prisons. They are in prison at home. The parents don't let them go out. You put them into another prison called a car, and they to another prison called the school. So children move from prison to prison to prison, and back to prison. Now, this is no way for children to grow up, because we are talking about the safety of the car, not the safety of the society. And the safe systems approach, in a sense, is making children's growth and life horrible. And we have to understand this. So I'm not against doing what we are doing with cars is really good, but we have to go beyond that. I'm showing you this because in the countries where car occupants are the main deaths, that proportion of population is much smaller than the countries where people outside the car are more important, as bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists. So if we just focus on the car's occupants, you're focusing on 20% of the world. Now, if you look at deaths in India, 75% of deaths are pedestrians, motorcyclists, and bicyclists at present. And I'm not going to show you those figures. We also know now that about 15 to, depending on the city, 15 to 25% of pedestrian deaths are impacts with motorcycles. This has not been studied at all. So, in terms of biomechanics, design, etc., and how do we prevent it? So, if all cars in India today satisfied NCAP, all cars in India by magic satisfied NCAP norms, will reduce deaths by 5% in India. So the issue is not that all cars should not satisfy NCAP norms. That's not the issue. Issue is we should do it, but we'll only reduce deaths by 5%. So what more do we have to do? So while it is important to establish latest motor vehicle standards, I think we have to focus on this alone will not reduce deaths dramatically in the world. And we have to focus on truck fronts, we have to focus on bus fronts. No one is, because 70% of pedestrians killed in countries like India are hit by buses and trucks. Industry is not willing to talk about this. And please remember, even the West, the pedestrian committee could not make up its mind for 20 years. To the same standard for pedestrian safety for cars is about the same today as it was proposed 20 years ago. Now, if Sweden and Japan and everyone else can't implement a safety standard in 20 years, what do you expect us to do? So I think this understanding that is tough and blind into the politics of it. We have to understand that. Why are we not able to influence it? And it's not only cars and buses and trucks. We have dozens of these designs all over the world. And these are our public transport, but officially it's not called public transport. These are public transport vehicles in all our countries. There are dozens of designs. They transport millions and millions of people every day. And if you include these as public transport, then every Asian and Indian city, more people use public transport than European cities, as a proportion. So it's not as if developing countries don't have public transport. More people use public transport than European countries because they don't have money to have a car. And they have to so they'll find ways which will be public, not personal, or walking and cycling. Now, I'm going to show you one more graph from Indian cities where we have reasonably good data. I'm going to focus on this vehicle, which is, I'll show it to you here. which is overloaded, 7 people in it instead of 3. And our data shows when this vehicle has 12 children overloaded, because that's the only way it can run, because of 3 children, then parents couldn't afford it. So it has to carry 12 people, and they never get hit. In Delhi, maybe 1 gets hit a year. So it's the safest way to send children to school is an overloaded auto, rickshaw, overloaded. If it is not overloaded, it will not be safe. Because when it's overloaded, then it drives much slower. And my latest PhD student has shown when it's overloaded, then all cars and other drivers, when they pass these vehicles, they keep a wider shape. We've done video analysis, and they keep a longer distance. Now, I'm not saying that children should rest of our lives or wherever go in these vehicles. The point is this is what's happening just now. And everyone condemns it. But you can't do anything about it because we don't have money to send them any other way. So we may as well find out what's happening so we don't focus unnecessarily where the danger does not lie. Now, if you look at safety, and I'm going to end with mostly with this, that we have been against small cars in the history of safety. But the way analysis has been done for small cars is because all small cars can go as fast as big cars. Now we happen to be in a situation where we have this vehicle in India, this one here, and we have collected data, and we find if you do the risk per passenger per trip of death, then the red bar is that unregulated vehicle. It is safer than your own car per trip, the risk of death. And I don't know why. That's just the numbers. So what we are saying here is that because it has no safety standards, but because it cannot go over 45 kilometers an hour, it's like a policeman regulating speed on the road. Most other vehicles can't go above that speed. He doesn't take as many risks. We don't know the real reasons. These are just numbers. But this gives me an idea that if this vehicle, which cannot go above 45 kilometers an hour, has such a low death rate, then we should be designing taxis for cities, which cannot go above 50 kilometers an hour by design, and we're not allowed to go on roads which have speed limits above 50. And then NCAP will have to come up with safety standards for all these vehicles, which are very different from the current vehicle standards. We haven't thought about it.
You've got 1 minute left.
So,
well,
therefore,
you haven't actually, but
Give him one.
that's
I'll
it.
give you one.
That's it. So therefore, I think we have to now think of very small vehicles which need not need as serious safety standards, but better, which may become as safe as cars as urban taxis. And I think, therefore, when we think we know everything, we actually don't. There's far too little, a lot missing which we don't know. And I would just end by saying that there is a great deal of promise in automated vehicles and so on, but I don't think in my lifetime, because it takes 20 years for the fleet to be replaced. And secondly, once Indians are pretty smart, once they know that the vehicle has to stop if you go in front of it, no automated car will move in India, which may be very good.
Exactly.
But so therefore, the automated cars, forget it, because pedestrians then are the kings on the road. And what I would say is that we now should force all countries to think of AEB for all vehicles, including trucks and buses, over time. We should have automatic emergency braking, efficient light systems, and lastly, alcohol interlocks. I don't think India can afford I'm finishing.
You've written me my instructions.
Yeah, done.
You wrote them.
Done.
And you said we have a very tight program, so
I'm
we
tight,
have to
done.
ensure that we keep within strict time limits. Thank you very much.
Thank you.